This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, we're going to blow your mind. That's really all you need to know. We're going to blow your mind, and we're going to talk to you about how to get out of a very dark space and how to live your life totally free. And as my last guest just said, to be on fire for this world. Somebody who couldn't stand to be on the planet about 13 years before. Her name was Jo Weatherford, 12 years sober, and an incredible story. She went from Playboy to being a professor. So if that doesn't hook you as far as interest is concerned, the message will surely inspire you. So Jo Weatherford is coming up. But first, my main man, big bro, Kevin Souza. So I definitely found myself down there. All right, well let's get you started. I really want to begin with sort of like your childhood. Like where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in what used to be a small town, Prescott, Arizona, but now it seems like everybody knows where that is. Yeah. But it's about 2 hours north of Phoenix, and it was a very small town when I was there. And my dad was a pilot for Southwest Airlines. They'd opened a base in Oakland, so there was like 30 pilot families that all descended upon Prescott, Arizona, and we all moved there at the same time. So that's where I grew up until I went to boarding school.
Any brothers, sisters?
I have a half brother. Okay. He's quite a bit older than me and was not really in the picture.
Okay.
So I was basically an only child.
So when you grew up, because we talk a lot about this as it relates to alcoholism and addiction, was that an environment for you to sort of find yourself prone, moving towards alcohol and drugs?
Yeah, especially within the airline industry, everybody drinks, and they all drink a lot. And so it was always available. It was always around. That was a huge part of my family lineage, was alcoholism.
Did you have, so you have that? Because my dad's side of the family, it's like you don't have to look long to find it. It's all over, right? I mean, it might, like legit, like if you, he was like functional, whatever you want to call that, but he kept a job, and he was he loved the shit out of us. And I love my father so much, but he was an alcoholic, and I saw it, and I saw it in his family, and I saw a lot of people die from it. And I don't know, as I guess early in your life, were you in tune with that? Like, okay, something here's happening around me that's a little different.
Yeah, and as a child, it was impossible to really make sense of it until about age 10. I think then I could identify, okay, it's the drinking, and that's what makes everything so chaotic and unsafe. But before that, I knew something was off, but I didn't know what. And as all kids are narcissists, I just figured it was me. The pressure to perform, whether it was grades or sports or looks, it was so overwhelming to me. And I heard the most brilliant thing the other day, that we as humans can manage any emotion except overwhelm. And so for me, anything that caused me that sensation within my body of, I don't know if I have the ability to hold this, right? Then I just let go of it. And it was really challenging. I was traveling a lot for softball, performing at this high level, and then drinking all the time.
And you said you were throwing close to 70 miles per hour.
Yeah, so 64 was kind of what I was pitching.
Yeah,
it was awesome. It was really fun.
Yeah. And then so similar, I can relate, like the moment, and I guess I'll ask you, is this what it was like for you? The moment I started to drink, I mean, everything else became secondary. For me, I love sports. I was like an outgoing kid. And those things didn't all like leave my life right away, but they took a back seat to alcohol and eventually drugs. Like, sounds like that sort of was your experience as well.
It was. I mean, I'm always hesitant to glamorize it, but there's just no other way to say it. That first drink for me was like an exhale.
Yeah.
I felt my whole life I was just taking in, and then I slammed this concoction, like the worst jungle juice you could ever imagine. And I just finally felt home. I
Yeah.
was like, this is the thing I've been looking for.
Now, were you at a high school party?
No, I was alone in my room and I was 12. I mean, mine started really early.
So I heard you say that when we were getting our shaky connection there. We got disconnected. So you were like a full-blown alcoholic, like at the age of 12.
I was. I mean, it wasn't my primary coping mechanism. It was my only. And I was drinking to black out several times a week.
And is that how you ended up in boarding school?
Well, it's kind of interesting. That actually is a funny story, and I've never told it on air before. But I wanted to go to boarding school. I did not want to live with my family. I felt they were completely unqualified to like raise humans, and so I just said I want to go, and they wouldn't let me. And so I stole a car. I drove from Arizona to California. I called them from a payphone because, of course, this was like 1996.
Yeah.
And I just told him, I'm like, if you don't send me to boarding school, I'm going to drive to Tijuana and you're never going to see me again. I mean, that's how done I was with that environment. And thankfully they did. I went to boarding school in Scottsdale. I ended up graduating a year early, second in my class, full ride academic scholarships to U of A, ASU, Grand Canyon, any of them. So I was sort of, like you were painting your dad, this really functioning alcoholic. I was really good at seeming to be okay.
And when you look back on your family, were they not qualified to raise you? Like, was it an environment like where it was no good?
God bless them, right? Everybody does the best they could. And it's funny, though, as a kid, you think your family knows what they're doing. You just
Totally.
think they know, like they have some kind of superpower. And then, as an adult now, I don't have kids, but I get it. You're just doing the best you can. And the reality was both of them had addiction issues. My dad was gone all the time. My mom and I drank a lot together. We had a really dysfunctional relationship. And yeah, I did not want to be there anymore. And then I became the scapegoat, not only for my family, but also the town. I was the bad one. I was the one having sex, dealing drugs, whatever. And it was a nightmare. Because, of course, from my lens, I wasn't doing anything that everybody else wasn't doing.
Yeah.
I just didn't hide it because I didn't need to.
Yeah, exactly. And with your parents, right, in that environment, like, yeah. So you end up going to boarding school. Now you have academically, obviously, you're very smart, and I think a lot of alcoholics are.
Yes.
Really, I do believe that. At least, if we get out of the way, beautiful things can happen. I mean, I've experienced that myself. But so do you go? I know you end up eventually in California. You end up modeling, but like, what happens with these scholarships, with these opportunities?
Well, because I was 16 when I graduated high school, my parents were like, we're moving to Reno, come with us for a year. They didn't want to be legally responsible for me starting college, which was probably a wise decision on their point. So I went to Reno with the idea that I would be there a year, take community college classes, and then transfer. But I ended up getting a job as the buyer for a country club, like all the fitness clothes. And then I started teaching fitness classes and I loved it. So I ended up staying in Reno and I went to the University of Nevada, Reno.
So you go to Nevada, Reno. What is that experience like?
It's amazing. I ended up years later becoming a professor there for 12 years. So I really got to see it change. But when I was there for undergrad, it was pretty small. You would see the same people everywhere and had a very cozy feeling, where now it's, this gigantic tier 1 university. But when I was there, it was really cozy.
So were you same thing, right? Like, you're obviously a big fish in high school and in Prescott, you go to boarding school. I would imagine it's sort of the same deal. And now here you are again, right, at this school. Were you the centerpiece of a lot of social activity? Did a lot of people know who you were? Like, I hate to use this term because it's like Mean Girls, but like popular. Yeah.
I was to a degree, but more in town with older people. I was not involved in the university. I didn't do the sorority thing. I had a fake ID. I never went to college parties. So again, I was 16, 17, 18, hanging out with people in mid 20s, already at bars doing that life. And so
You mentioned that when you were 12, you had a boyfriend that was like 19. I heard you say that on the Knocking Doors Down pod. Like, and now here you are again, hanging out with older people. Like, was that something where you looked older than you were, or were you just kind of beyond hanging out with people your age? Because let's face it, you could. Like people, when I was like, I was skinny, kind of had like big ears. When I was like in high school, nobody at 19 years of age was looking to hang out with me, when I was like 14. But probably a different story with you. So I'm imagining like you're experiencing a lot at a young age, which looks like a lot of fun, but I would imagine that's kind of damaging.
No, it's a nightmare. I lost my innocence so early on. And if anybody has kids, it's like, God, any way that we can help them preserve that as long as possible. It's like you have your whole life to be dealing with this kind of nonsense that comes with growing up. And but for me, I was parentified as a kid. I was always responsible for my mom's emotions. I was kind of in that shifted, inverted dynamic anyway, where I was like the adult and had to assume so many adult roles early on that I just don't think I had a chance. Then add to it, I always look 30. At age 12, I look 30,
Yeah.
At age 25, I look 30. I think at 40, I've always looked like this,
Yeah.
Bad combo.
So you end up in college, and we're going to get to the recovery here, but I'd love to get people's stories. I find that so interesting. When I was like early in recovery, I one of the reasons I do this is because, and we're both 12 years, right? So, and I could not stop drinking and using, and it was to the point where it had become, like it does for a lot of us, it had become very pathetic. And it was sad. I don't even pathetic, if I'm trying to use the right words, but I would see documentaries every so often, whether it was like a Behind the Music, right, or like an ESPN like Sports Century classic documentary about somebody who got sober, and there was so much hope in that. So I love these stories. I do appreciate you sharing this with us, like what your story was like some of those scars before we get to walking in the sunlight, because for me, all the pain I've experienced, I did experience in addiction, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, truly it is. It's a superpower for me now. And it's enabled me to learn so much about myself. So like, as your story like moves on, and I can tell that you had the same experience or similar the way you talk about it, because you don't glamorize it. It was a nightmare, but it is part of your story. And you're in college. What happens to you when you end up kind of moving it down the line? You become a model. I love how you mentioned you stole a street sweeper with a bunch of friends. I mean, you're the first person on here that's done that. And I've had people here do a lot of shit. I've never heard anybody steal a street sweeper. So take me through a little bit of your story as you evolve and you start to get older, you get into modeling. How does that work out for you after college?
Well, it's interesting. I never wanted to be a model. I wanted to be a serious broadcast journalist. And that was my plan. My undergrad is in broadcast journalism. I got a phenomenal opportunity for our local NBC. I was co-hosting a show Sunday mornings at 9 a.m.
Oh, so you were doing like local news stuff.
Yes.
Look at you in Reno. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah. It was great. It was called The Home Show. And I did like a lot of, this is the new store that's opening in Day Spa and community events. And it was so much fun. And I decided, I'm like, this is what I want to do, but I want to do hard news. I want to make a difference. And then it's kind of the story of the frog that just slowly boils. Like if you throw a frog in boiling water, it will jump out. But if you put it in lukewarm water and just heat it degree by degree slowly, you can cook it to death. And that was kind of my career.
Yeah.
So yeah, at first I started off doing a lot of spokesmodeling. I traveled with a couple motorcycle companies, Sturgis Biketoberfest. I'm just sitting there signing autographs, posing on bikes. I mean, it was so much fun and just stupid money. And the best thing was I could drink, not just could drink, it was encouraged for me to drink.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the perfect storm. But I started doing that when I was still in school. And then I started getting opportunities for modeling. And, first it was fashion, then it was swimwear, then it was lingerie. And then it's like, oh, Playboy wants you, then we're going to do that. And then I'm working for a hustler. And, it just quickly was a downslide. But
How heady is that? I don't care what you're doing, or how much you're partying, or how much you're kind of numbing it out. For you, I mean, that's huge. You're a young woman. You're in the pages of Playboy. I mean, and that's that's the crown jewel of of those type of modeling. It's a real opportunity. So how are you handling that?
Well, it was interesting. So I specifically worked for Playboy TV, and I did a lot of their reality TV shows. And I mean, it was sad for me to hear all of the allegations come out about Playboy recently. I will only speak to my experience. I had a stretch limo come pick me up. I was always treated with a lot of respect at that time. I loved going to the mansions. Those were some of the best parties ever. And I will say I've been more sexually harassed and treated and just absolutely objectified in corporate America and quote unquote real jobs than I ever was at Playboy. So
even as a professor in that whole in education?
Thankfully not.
Okay.
I also worked for all women at the university, but I mean, I do a lot of speaking. A lot of people hire me. I mean, I've had judges that I'm at a barbecue with their family that's doing this big speech, and then the next thing I know, they've cornered me. It's just absolutely ridiculous, but that didn't happen at Playboy.
Yeah. I appreciate the way you say it. You have a very easy way of delivering this stuff, but it's even tough to hear. You know what I mean? Because you're there, you're being open to certain things, and then people, I can't imagine how much that would happen to you and how much alcohol and drugs is involved in that, because you said something I heard you say, and I totally could relate to it. I drank, and then I continued to drink because I was ashamed of stuff I did while I was drunk. Whether it was intentional or not, or sometimes stuff happens to you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make it okay, but you are drunk. So there's shame there, right? What was your experience like with that kind of stuff?
Well, it's interesting. There's this idea within relationships that relationships don't cause us pain and sadness. They simply reveal the pain and sadness already within us. And I really feel that pertains to my drinking and shame. Yes, things I did while I was drunk caused me shame, but really what it did was reveal the shame that was already within me. And I can speculate where that came. I mean, having very conditional love, very high demands of perfectionism, I think that can create a lot of shame. I was molested when I was 4 sexually. I mean, it's kind of sad, but this shit is textbook. When you really start digging into people's stories, you can usually go oh, that's what happened. And so that shame was already within me, and now as within, so without. It was I just magnetized it, and instead of healing it, I became it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with women using their bodies to make money. I think that's a very personal decision. For me, I would have never done it sober. That did not align with my values, what I wanted for myself. So the reality was I was absolutely out of alignment with my true self doing that. So an intense amount of shame was created. I mean, the version of me now is healed enough. I can go back and meet, that 20-year-old with a lot of love and compassion, and I'm no longer ashamed of it. I'm not proud of it. It's honestly was the best option for me at the time. And it was insane money back then. And there was the illusion of glamour, which I think can really hook us, And you
absolutely.
Look at social media. Yeah, I mean, just all these reflections back, and you made it. And inside, I just wanted to die. I mean, it was just the inside did not match the outside.
Yeah. I mean, I was a young guy growing up, lived in New York City. I worked for a sports agent, and I just wanted to be at the party like where people like you were. And for real, and like that was really alluring for me. And it was like a total mind fuck. Like you think this is so cool and glamorous and this and that, and it's not. And for me, I learned the hard way. You know, like I told you, I just completely rock bottom. But for you, you mentioned, you know, I guess you got arrested. There was a suicide attempt, right?
Yes.
But then everything starts to change. Like, well, take me to your bottom and take me to how you come back up. Because the person we're talking about who wasn't aligned with who you are today, I was telling a dude today, like, I was like, you know, 13 years ago, like, you probably wouldn't recognize me, inside and out. So, like, how did that happen for you, where you got to become this person we're able to recognize today?
You know, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, that old cliche saying. But what specifically happened was, if you can imagine, I had just been at Half Sadie's birthday party. I'm living in Newport Beach. I'm dating one of the Chargers. I just shot for FHM magazine. I finally had my clothes on for once. Like, my family could see it. Everybody's all excited, you know. But I wake up and I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. I'm on my kitchen floor in this beautiful house, this beautiful life. And I literally was going to kill myself. That feeling of wanting to die had been with me since childhood. But it's a very different experience when you're like, now I'm ready to take action on it. And it was like this clawing at me that I couldn't escape. And so I called my mom and I said, I need to go to rehab. Like, I don't even know what that means. All I know is I'm not going to make it. And so I did. I went to one of those really bougie ass treatment centers. This was like $100,000 that they basically gave me AA, which is supposed to be free, but it did keep me alive. So
Where'd you go? Did you go someplace in California or someplace on the East Coast, or?
I went in Newport Beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So was this when everything, did it take the first time? Like, it took me 10 years to get a year.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned bottoms, because you would think that that was mine, but I managed to get lower. And I like this philosophy of bringing the bottom up, you know, so we don't have to go through so much destruction. But for me, I never learned that way. I'm always like, let me see if there's more. We can go deeper.
Yeah.
So that was my first bottom. And I stayed sober for 6 months, but I never did hard drugs again. So that worked. But for me, alcohol was always the biggest issue. Like, I used to do coke so that I wouldn't drink. I mean, my addiction has always really been alcohol.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, me too. That's been like my baseline. Like, just alcohol was everything to me, and everything else would come in around that. And I love coke and alcohol together because I could continue to drink and party, and it was just. But sooner or later, you're running out of one, and we're the worst chemists in the world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That is just the worst feeling ever. But yeah, so I did get it together. When I was in detox, they fed me Sunny Delight and Ruffles potato chips for like 3 weeks, and I put on 50 pounds.
No shit.
0.
So what was that like for you? Somebody who'd been so proud of their body, right? You know.
I mean, it was so bad at Family Week. My dad came in and walked right past me. He did not. My own father did not recognize me. But you know, there was a part of me that struggled with it, and then this other part of me that was like, oh my God, this is the most free I've ever felt. Because all of a sudden, I wasn't feeling like the world was just looking at me for that reason.
Yeah.
You know, it was really, really fascinating to be in this body that I didn't recognize, that people weren't constantly staring at. It was an unbelievable sense of freedom.
So where did you go from there? I mean, you're in treatment. Does anything happen to you in treatment, like beneath the surface, where you're like, okay, this I can do this. Like this makes me feel. I started to get feelings in rehab, of by being vulnerable and telling people really what was going on with me for the first time ever, I got the same feelings I would get from alcohol and drugs. I got like supercharged. I felt like free. Anything like that happen for you?
You know, two things. A, my family showed up at the highest level, and that in and of itself was so therapeutic and healing for me.
Yeah.
And we've really had a beautiful relationship since. So I'm very grateful for that. The second thing is I have repressed the memory of being molested when I was little until I was in treatment. And a male therapist had worked with me. And then sure enough, I started having these memories. It turned out that the person that assaulted me, there had been police called and everything on him for doing it to another young girl, but I didn't tell. So that's another part of the shame that I carried. I remember the police coming and asking me if that had happened, and I lied. And yet here was this other little girl that actually spoke her truth. But I was too scared. I don't know if I thought I deserved it. Whatever the reason was, I kept my mouth shut. I think I didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I buried that shame of, I don't even love myself enough to tell the truth about this, and this happened to me.
Yeah.
So when this therapist uncovered it, there was this real sense of, oh my God, wow, I've been holding that, and it was powerful. The problem is 2 years to the day after I got out of treatment, he hit on me. So different therapists have different regulations. Yeah. So this asshole waited exactly 2 years. And then the guy that had helped me through so much of my sexual trauma sent me an email saying, I want to show you what a real man is like. And I'm not blaming him, but I spiraled. I mean, that was the reality. I was already super fragile, but that one really sent me.
Did you have this feeling like people have always been attracted to my looks my whole life? Like, once again, this guy was spending time with me because he was trying to, win me over?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it's like, is that what kept happening to me? Because I believed that was true about the world. And there was some part of me energetically that kept attracting those experiences in. And I'm not saying that to blame victims, because I know that's what it sounds like. But this is actually a concept in psychology that has been proven: repetition compulsion. And we know the beliefs that we hold within ourselves, we then seek evidence to back it up. You know? So if I believe that the only thing that makes me special or worth paying attention to is my sexuality, then it's not surprising that I was in so many situations with men that then affirmed that belief. Now, again, just for anybody listening, that does not excuse the behavior 100% that is on the person that is doing the perpetrating. But for me, that's something I really had to look at and work through, is like, do I believe that about myself?
Yeah.
And the answer now is no.
No, it's bullshit, but that's what we tell. But you said the repetition, it's on loop in your head, and that can do a number on you. And it takes intense work to get out of there, but there is a way out. And we're talking about it. So you spiral and you hit bottom. What happens before you are able to? I guess for me, I had the gift of desperation, where I was like, no more, because I did the same thing. I stopped drinking for a year, but 6 months in, I started smoking weed all the time. 3 months in, actually. See, I still fucking can't be honest about it. 3 months in, I started smoking weed. Right? I mean, it's like, I'll say that. So 3 months in, I started smoking weed, and because I needed to be a part of, I needed to be connected with people. And then I was back out for another 6-7 years before I was finally brought to my knees. What happened to you where you were finally like, all right, everything's off the table?
Yeah, it's such an interesting position to be in when you want to quit something, it's wrong. I was never in denial ever. Even when I was little, I knew I had a problem, and it was obvious, and it was so bad I needed to do something about it. I just never could, or I wasn't ready, or I didn't know how. But as an adult, I knew I was sick, and I had stayed sober for a couple years. And then I went back out and I started drinking again. And of course, it picked up right where I left off, and it got even worse. And the consequences were worse. That was, I was arrested. The mental health, though, was awful. I remember it was so suicidal. I get thrown into this mental institution. Of course, they just load me up with all these different prescription psychiatric medication, which only made me so much worse because, of course, I'm still drinking on it. And it was just this awful, like, even the time back then that I managed to be sober, I was white knuckling every second. It was like I was just trying to not drink. And it was fascinating because fast forward, like, 10 years later, I'm in a marriage that's just really, really toxic. I'm kind of addicted to him.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I left, it was that same feeling. It was just, oh my God, I can't stay away from this person, this drink, just the compulsion.
Yeah.
And desire was just overwhelming. So eventually I gave in, and anybody that's going through intense withdrawals and cravings and white knuckling it, my hat's off to you. You're stronger than me, because when I really have a craving, eventually I will give in. I mean, it's the bottom line.
So how did you break free?
So I went to an aversion therapy clinic, which was the most insane experience ever. And I've done a lot of crazy things. Like, I just got back from an Iboga retreat in Nicaragua, and that was pretty intense. But this was...
You're a seeker. You are.
I am. I will always find a way.
And the healthiest of, like, the healthiest kind. Like, I mean, I think when you're in sobriety and you're seeking, that's just like you're trying to get next level spirituality. You're chasing the right kind of stuff. So you went to an aversion therapist. I'm sorry, I jumped in. Yeah.
No, it's so sad because the place shut down, and it was the only kind in all of America.
What is aversion therapy for people who don't know? So
it sounds crazy because basically you get so sick from drinking that it kind of rewires your brain to not want it. And at first I was like, well, that's not going to work. I drink and throw up all the time. That's like Tuesday. That's not going to do anything. But it's very different. So you go into this little room and they inject you with something that causes flu-like symptoms. And then they make you drink a water glass full of Ipecac. So if you have kids, you'd give a kid like a tablespoon if they ingest something they shouldn't have to make a vomit. Well, I drank a water glass full of it. And then I proceeded to drink 20 water glasses full of alcohol, and you're just vomiting like The Exorcist. It is the absolute worst. And then they stick you in a room and soak a rag in alcohol and put it under your nose. You've just got to sit there with that smell and be sick all night. But the coolest thing is the next day they would do an IV of truth serum and propanol, which is what Michael Jackson OD'd on.
Yeah.
But if they do it at a lower dose, you actually wake up in a different room and listen to counseling sessions that they do with your unconscious. And they also test to make sure the aversion is working. And they also implant affirmations. I do not drink. I do not crave alcohol. And I'll tell you, it was 10 days, and that was 12 years ago. And I still, to this day, get queasy if I make out with somebody that just drank, or if I'm around it. I'm like, I can't.
So, but you're anything but, like, following your story, you're anything but like white knuckling it. I mean, I don't know if you do 12 steps or whatever, but whatever you're doing is working. Like watching like your TED Talk when you're talking to people at Nevada, and you taught there, at Nevada, Reno, right? You taught there for, I don't know how many years, a class on addiction, which they don't just let any joker roll in there and teach those classes at that level. Like, what did you do after this aversion therapy or this treatment, which most people would say, let's face it, I'm not breaking any news, it's unorthodox, right?
Yeah.
But it's intense, it's unorthodox. But that's also another reason why I have this pod, because I love 12 steps, right? That saved my life. But I also know there's other ways to do it. And like, come one, come all. Let's all get under the same sober tent and share our stories and do what works for us, right? So what worked for you after you get done those 10 days? What brings you to this person who now is constantly helping other people, whether it's on a one-on-one basis or large groups of people?
I did try AA. That was not a good fit for me. I love the book. I love the steps. I've worked on. It just that I knew I needed a different avenue, and so I've worked with amazing therapists. I've done a lot of different somatic types of therapy, EMDR, the rapid eye movement therapy has been great. I've also done a lot of his holistic healing, 5-day water fast and body work and different trauma, work in that way. And then also psychedelic therapy has been fundamental in my healing. And, set and setting is everything. I worked with incredible practitioners, and that for me was how I really tapped into those deeper layers. Now, because I did the aversion therapy, I didn't want to drink, but that didn't mean that I knew how to handle and manage being a human.
Yeah.
I still felt very uneasy in my body, and a lot of those patterns, addicted patterns of reactivity and the limiting beliefs and the shame, that was still there. So I have still, I'm not by no means saying I'm healed, but I have my work to do, and being okay, not being okay, learning how to sit in those unpleasant emotions and widen my window of tolerance for unpleasantness. Like that has been my journey, and it's been amazing. Coaches, therapists, psychedelics, it has been a wild ride, but I'm so thankful, and truly stopping drinking is what made all of it possible. And it was just the beginning.
Yeah. And as your journey continues, you are ending up, and I don't want you to give away all the answers to the test, but like, what are some of the things you use to help some of the people that you're working with today? I think first and foremost, like helping people with their personal relationships with other people. Like, how do you help people connect with others?
Well, I do a lot of intimacy coaching with my clients and their partners. One of the issues with conflict is we do it from a disconnected place. So then all of our insecure little beings within us get triggered, and then we're trying to connect and have this dialogue with somebody, and we're coming from this place of fear of rejection. So defenses are just completely off the charts.
Off the charts. When I start getting that rejection, that fear starts to bubble up in me, like it's off the table, the insanity that comes next. Truly, like, and it's usually nothing overt, but it will be like, okay, well, I can't, like, I'm going to hurt them now. Like, I can't, like, even before, I'm just like whiffing rejection here. And I'm like over the top, right in the other direction. It's a real issue. In recovery, it's been the same way. I continue to work on it, right? And I find for myself, you end up with a partner who suits you, right? Who's not going to put you in that position over and over again to feel totally feared up and like you're being rejected. I think it was for me like a combination of both. But some of the healing you're doing, I got one of my best friends is working with, I won't get into that right now, but with what you're doing, him and his wife are kind of doing that right now to make their marriage whole again, or to try to,
Well, yeah, that wound gets triggered, that old energy, and now all of a sudden you're completely hijacked. And, the dynamic is usually one person is just nagging, the other is shut down, then eventually somebody is going to blow, and then it becomes about their behavior of you yelled, and now we don't talk about the issue. These are very common dynamics, but if you can get two people and have them sit down and eye gaze for 3 minutes and put their hands on one another's hearts and like let him breathe, and then sync up your breath with your partner and really drop in and like, I love you and I choose you. And from this space, let's discuss what needs attention. Then it's a very, very different experience of vulnerability, which is really, that is so necessary to reach those depths of intimacy that I think most of us crave, but we're so unfamiliar with. And that feels so scary, which is why it can be great to have somebody holding space.
Yeah.
But if you're just going into talk therapy, just bitching and complaining and just running the old narrative, good luck with that. Nobody wants to hear that shit all day.
Talk to me about the new narrative. Like, That's one thing I just thought of I wanted to cover with you. You know, you have done an exceptional job of changing the narrative for you in your life. You know, rewriting your story of recovery, you call it. You know, what are some of the steps that go into that, because for me, it was all about doing esteemable things. Once I started to do esteemable things and do honorable things, I realized that I wasn't the person that I thought I was. You know, that I really, it was a lie. And that, you know, I had this alcohol, cocaine, whatever, that'd been polluting my body for so long. I was doing a lot of shit I was ashamed of, but it was the page had turned and now I was in control. What did you do? Like, that's kind of what I did, but what did you find yourself practicing to rewrite that narrative?
You know, mine, a lot of it came down to self-love. You know, I started treating my body, because at first I didn't love myself, but I started treating myself like, if I love myself, what would I do? How would I eat? Who would I hang out with? You know, what would I say yes to? Because for me, a lot of it was the people pleasing and the trying to live up to other people's expectations that was so toxic. So I just started really prioritizing my own genuine happiness. And then I started building trust within myself. Then I learned how to set boundaries, which is something I didn't know how to do. I was always overextended, always saying yes when I meant no. So I was cut off from my intuition. So as I started healing my gut, learning to be able to hear my own voice, prioritizing my own needs as if I loved myself, slowly but surely I started to. And acts of service is a huge part. I mean, that is like the oxygen that we need. And the other one is gratitude. And that's a big thing I work with my clients on. I have this guy, you know, he's super, super successful developer, building this $30 million house, and he can't sleep, you know, and it can be as simple as this. And I share this story because I think it's relatable, not the $30 million necessarily, but, you know, he was just up all night, like worrying about this house. So such a simple exercise. I'm like, I want you to walk through every room and tell me what's right with the house. And so we did that for like an hour. Tell me what you love about it. Show me pictures, you know, what are you excited about? What are you proud of? And then all of a sudden, you're going to sleep. You know what I mean? It's like gratitude is what can flip the switch on that activates every cell within our body. And when I see this life as a gift, again, going back to the lens, we collect evidence to back up our beliefs. So if I believe, wow, this is a gift, I get to be here, I'm going to show up in a way that attracts more of those situations and experiences and evidence to affirm it is a gift. It is a miracle. I get to be here. Wow.
Do you have like 5 more minutes? Just a couple more things?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Gut health, you mentioned. I think that's like super, you know, mind, body, spirit. For people that are just throwing stuff in their body and like not understanding how important that is. Can you shine a light on that and then tell somebody, I mean, and this is like, you know, I'm reaching here, but how do people change that? Because I think that's paramount to really, like, for me, my positivity and my outlook on life. I mean, like, my entire outlook on life sometimes I see is connected to my gut health.
Yeah. It's big. And, you know, all of our serotonin and dopamine is actually made in the gut. That is the throne of our intuition. That is your most precious resource. And so it's like putting nail polish in a Ferrari when you are eating toxic crap. And the problem is until you stop, you don't realize it. Because when you clean up your diet and you fuel yourself with healthy food, when you go back and eat that crap that you've eaten your whole life, you don't feel good. But it's like the eye can't see itself. You don't know what you don't know. And your body is used to fueling itself off sugar and chemicals and all this crap. So even eating healthy can be very, it's not fun, right? At first. Eventually, you will change your gut microbiome and you will actually crave healthy food. You will not crave Doritos and shit anymore. The bottom line is you just won't, and you will feel so much better. But I think too, a lot of it is your intent and your why. And I think doing the research, is really how you will shift that, because we shame and scare people into a lot of things and it never works. Like think of dare, for drugs.
Yeah, that
Because
works.
I dare you to try it.
Yeah.
Sex ed, right?
Yeah.
All this stuff. Will come at porn addiction and be like, from a religious moral standpoint, you're a bad person. But it's like, if you just understand what that does to your brain, now you can actually digest why this may not be a good thing for you to do. So when you start really understanding the science and the physiology of what eating toxic food does to you and how it hurts you, that can help you make better choices. And it's also discipline. I used to own a gym, and it's like, there's no cheat, and your motivation is great now. But what happens in 3 hours when you don't feel motivated? Like right now, I'm on day 2 of the water fast. It sucks. I don't like it. I'm hungry. I'm a little fuzzy. I'm also weirdly energized, but I do it because I know it's important and I want that dead cell autophagy.
How long does the water fast last?
I'm going to do 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I've been pushing my body a lot lately, so I'm going to listen to it. But
Okay.
I do 3 to 5 days.
And so what do you like life in Mexico? How is it? First of all, how are your relationships now in sobriety?
They're amazing. Yeah. I mean, my family and I are phenomenal. I just got back from a trip to Yosemite with them.
By the way, that's the miracle I'm talking about. I don't know your story inside and out. It's been really cool to hear some of it today, but you seems like might have been the change agent for your entire family to kind of come back together. And that's pretty awesome. These relationships you're talking about now with your family are a lot different than the way you were painting the picture, when you were in your teens, right? Or whatever. And I don't know, that's like a hunch I have, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case.
Well, it's pretty fascinating. My mom she had gotten sober and didn't drink for 13 years. And so that also was very healing for our relationship. And she recently started drinking again, which just about broke me. That was one of the most shattering things I ever had to process and deal with, but it also exposed the codependency and enmeshment that still lived in me and was still impacting my relationship. So it allowed me a lot of healing, but it was challenging, to just look at her and say, okay, I love you. I'm going to trust you to handle this. And please don't mess this up. I love you. And I don't want to lose you because you die or because I have to set boundaries and can't be around you anymore. So okay, you're a grown ass adult, figure it out. And I love you and I'm here for you however I can be. But wow, what a different experience me now showing up for that conversation versus me,
right?
Even 10 years ago.
Did she stop drinking kind of aligned with you and your struggles?
She actually went first and she almost died. So she had a series of strokes and was in ICU for a week. And they basically told her, if you ever drink again, you're going to die. So that was enough for her. She didn't do any of the work. And, but my mom's an interesting woman. I mean, she was the first Hispanic female commercial airline pilot. My mom's a badass. My mom was a model, a flight attendant, and then she went into that industry and was like, oh, I want to fly a plane. And everyone's like, what?
So both your parents were pilots?
Both of them were, yeah. So she flew for Braniff and actually met my dad on a flight, and he was not excited about having a woman pilot at all. And he let her know that. But this is the funniest thing. There was a passenger that was super drunk and out of control, and they were going to have to make an emergency landing. My mom went back to him, and this is in the 70s, granted, and she took the fire extinguisher and she hosed this dude and then tied him to the seat. And then they were able to keep going. And my dad was like, I'm going to marry you. So
that's a love story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your parents, I mean, that's amazing. And all the stuff you told me today is amazing. I guess I gotta let you go, but I want a couple more things before you leave, or at least one more thing. A young woman, a young dude, fucking old person, an older person, what that feels like they just don't have any hope. You know, that person that you were when you were peeling yourself up off the floor at that beautiful home in Newport Beach. You know, if you're talking to that person that thinks like, I can't get out of this, you know, what do you tell them? What do you try to convey to them?
You know, at first, I think it's important to just recognize you don't need hope. You just need action, which is like, get yourself up, go to a meeting, keep putting yourself in situations where something can land, because that's a scary thing. If you tell me I need to have faith and hope and I don't, then I'm going to be struggling for action. I mean, the bottom line is I didn't think I was ever going to get sober until I did. And so that's the other piece is, you know, like if you have tried a million times, it just hasn't happened yet. It's not like you failed, you know, and as long as we stay on this planet, we keep seeking help, we keep moving forward, stay in motion in some way, shape, or form. And it's like, that's how something lands. And I know the hopelessness, I know the struggle, I know the despair, but I will also say, if I can do it, anybody can do it, because I am not special. And people look at me and they're like, yeah, but she probably doesn't know what I went through. No, I had 3 actual suicide attempts. I was in jail. I literally hated myself. There was not one speck of light in me. And if I can get to where I am now, grateful for my life, super healthy, just on fire for this world, it can absolutely happen for anyone. So just keep trying.
Joe, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? Where can, like, if I wanted to share some links, I'm going to put them all in the show notes.
So I'm really active on Facebook and Instagram at Joe Weatherford. Like, feel free to send me a message. Any way I can support, I can send free resources. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, I do that as well. If you have questions about psychedelic assisted therapy, hit me up. Like, any way I can support you, let me know. And then my website is recoveryremix.com.
All right. And if people ask, I'm definitely going to share your contact with podcast hosts, like whoever, because I think your message needs to get out there. It's exceptional. Yeah. What you're doing is awesome. And it's a little different too, which is great. Right?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks. This will probably go up not this coming week, but the one after. And I'll shoot you a note and I'll shoot you a link. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Truly an honor. So nice meeting you.
Yeah, and thank you for your patience too early on. I really appreciate it.
Oh my God, yes.
You're the real deal. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network